Yeah, don't check the news. The news is bad today. But whether it's good or bad, we're back. Corey Singletary here with the Citizens Utility Board, along with
Tom Content, Citizens Utility Board.
Tom Content, our valiant executive director. I do not envy your job most days.
Rah.
We just got back from the commission today. We had a little meeting, and maybe we'll talk about that some other time. But we kind of teased it the last time we met. We were going to talk about Kewaunee nuclear power plant. And let me read this from the Wisconsin State Journal. $835 million in contractor hands after utility regulators approve sale of Kewaunee Nuke plant. That's an editor trying to get a lot into a byline, into a headline. But $835 million nuclear power plant decommissioning, fun times.
That's right. Here's this plant for those who haven't been keeping score on all of our nuclear plants. This is the plant that shut down in 2013, if I remember right. Dominion at the time said it was no longer economic. They no longer had power purchase agreements in place with the Wisconsin utilities that had sold the plant, and so they sold it back then. And now last year they approached the PSC again to sell it to Energy Solutions, which is one of the companies that is in the business of doing decommissioning of nuclear plants around the country. But in this case, we had a separate company, North Star, that also got involved in the case, saying it could actually do it for less.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history with this plant. I mean, you mentioned in passing that the Kewaunee nuclear power plant used to belong to Alliant Energy, Wisconsin Public Service Corporation, and MG&E.
That's right.
Back in the day. And if I recall correctly, the sale of the plant to Dominion was not the smoothest thing in the universe. There was some contentious issues, and I think a lot of folks, or some folks at the time, felt like that was not the best move for the utilities to divest themselves of what was perceived of as a low-cost facility. But that's a whole other drama that maybe if we wanted to get into that at some point, we'd get into. But as you mentioned, the plant was shut down.
Right.
And has been shut down. And if nothing else happened, it was on schedule to be decommissioned eventually.
Yeah, at least over the next 60 years or so.
Yeah, over the next 60 years. So maybe to boil down what you had said earlier, the current owner struck a deal with a company called Energy Solutions, who said, we will decommission the plant. We will decommission it early. If you sell us the plant, essentially do a stock transfer, and then we will own the plant, and then we will decommission it and take care of all of the, everything that's entailed with that process of essentially returning the facility to a usable, to be usable for anything other than just holding, a nuclear power plant that's not doing anything. And, normally this would be something that we would kind of sit on the sidelines for, because this is mostly outside of sort of state jurisdiction. This is mostly something that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would handle. This is more of a federal issue in terms of nuclear decommissioning. But as the headline from the Wisconsin State Journal suggests, there's some money on the table.
Right, exactly. I mean, ratepayers of all the Wisconsin utilities paid in hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars through the years to a fund specifically for decommissioning. And there's still $835 million left in that fund. And the question is, will it actually cost $835 million to decommission the plant? And that's where North Star got involved in this case, and they said, actually, we don't think it's going to cost $835 million. We think we can do it for far less.
And the reason that's important is because when the commission approved the sale of approved the sale of Kewaunee to Dominion back in the day, one of the conditions it put on that was that any unspent decommissioning funds would be returned to the customers who originally, pitched into that fund. At this point, because of how that sale went, That would be Alliant customers and Wisconsin Public Service customers. MG&E kind of got cashed out essentially. When that transaction happened, but there are potentially hundreds of millions of dollars that could flow back to Alliant and pub service customers if the ultimate cost of decommissioning, the ultimate cost of decommissioning the plant, comes out to be less than what's left in the balance.
Yeah. So when you're with hundreds of millions of dollars in customer potential savings involved, that's something CUB cares about. That's so we got involved.
Yeah, and so we were involved in that case. I think everyone here would agree that it ended up being more complicated and more of a task than maybe we thought it was going to be initially. But from our perspective, there were a couple things. One, the utilities, the previous owners kind of had to sign off on the sale of the plant to Energy Solutions for the decommissioning. They had a right of first refusal. And one of our, concerns or issues was, we've talked about there's this potential upside for customers, right? That if there's money left over, that would be money that would be returned to customers.
Exactly.
The utilities, in examining that, when they put in their testimony, they all talked about, downside risk, right? And how they would not want to expose their customers to decommissioning a plant. They wouldn't want to take over ownership of a plant. And let's be clear, CUB at no point in this case said, yes, utilities, you should buy back this plant and own it and decommission it yourselves. But there was no opportunity. We were talking about hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. There was no opportunity for the utility shareholders to potentially have an upside or benefit from any of this unspent funds. And so we felt like, the utilities make creative deals all the time if there's an opportunity to earn shareholder money, right? To earn more money for their shareholders. And we felt there was just sort of a lack of creative, deal making and business, acumen here. With respect to the exercise or waiver of their right of first refusal when it came to this transaction. And we felt like that something to the benefit of customers should have been negotiated or could have been worked out.
Well, customer money is something is real money that everybody should care about. Yeah.
So that was the one part. It was like, look, the utilities go after money for their shareholders all the time in all kinds of interesting and creative ways, and it's like there wasn't a single way you could have done the same thing for customers. The other part was, that wasn't really sort of central to what we were talking about, but was what you had mentioned before, that North Star, which is another company that does decommissioning, had basically said, hey, you know what? Oftentimes we do things on a fixed price basis. We'll tell a company, hey, we'll charge, in this case, they thought it would cost that they would bill $550 million to decommission the plant. And then from the perspective of the client, the owner of the facility, that's how much it costs, and the rest is on North Star if it goes over that. And when we looked at the case and we really started thinking about it, the deal would make it so that there's essentially no incentive for Energy Solutions to be frugal with the customer's money that was put in the decommissioning fund.
Right, and when you're talking about one company that's saying we can do this for $550 million, that's as North Star said, it's not complicated math. That's $285 million in potential savings that could flow back to customers or could have flowed back to customers, and that's the lack of any mechanism to or incentive to keep costs down is a real concern here. We see that across the industry where the incentives need to be placed with the customer in mind. Incentives for affordability, incentives for keeping costs down. That's a concern that CUB has across the utility system, and that's a concern, obviously, in this case.
Yeah, and that makes me think of another issue that we've been working on, which is performance-based regulation, which is something the Commission has been talking about, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the future. But you're right, it really does come down to the incentive structure, because unless there's money on the table, very few actors in this industry do things just because it's the right thing to do. And essentially, we had mentioned the NRC. The NRC will be there essentially as the federal regulatory body to make certain that the decommissioning gets done and gets done safely and properly, and also within the amount of money that's allowed. One of the things that they kind of keep an eye on is whether or not the decommissioning activities are spending money at a rate that it would suggest that they're going to run out of cash. Essentially, what's the burn rate? Are you going to run out of money before you finish the job? And so the NRC is there to make certain that the job is finished within the allowable, within what's left, within the money that's left on the table. But the NRC's job isn't there to make certain that there is anything beyond that left.
Right. They're not there to say do it for $100 or $200 million less. They just want to make sure that there's sufficient money, ample money in the fund to complete the job.
Yeah. Energy Solutions could leave $1 left of the decommissioning fund, and it would be completely sufficient from the standpoint of the NRC, which is fine because that's their job, is just more safety, from the standpoint of decommissioning. And that's where, we were really hoping that our commission would step in and make some decisions and that, that might be beneficial to customers.
Yeah, no, it's a missed opportunity for savings, not savings today, but savings down the road.
Yeah. So basically, Wisconsin Public Service customers and Alliant customers, maybe there'll be some money coming back, but essentially we have to all pin our hopes on Energy Solutions finding it in their heart to be as frugal and as efficient as they possibly can.
Yeah, no, I mean, we hope that they'll be as cost effective and frugal, and watch what they spend on this project as it unfolds, so that that money does flow back eventually. But the incentive mechanism isn't there to reward savings. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges was it went beyond just sort of the incentives. Actually, it's related to the incentives, but the part that was sort of, I guess, troubling for us is that Energy Solutions essentially does things on a sole source basis, right? They have various subsidiaries and affiliates that they then, contract out to do parts of the decommissioning work under the project, but it's all under the same company, right? So if you're essentially the money's changing hands from one side to the other, and at the end of the day, it's all going to sort of enrich the parent company.
It's all from the same place,
yeah,
essentially.
And it's all benefiting the same sort of parent company. There's no incentive to be efficient, to be frugal. If it were arm's length negotiated contracts with third parties, that's different, right? But,
or if there'd been competitive bidding with multiple vendors bidding, providing low cost bids to do the work, or to buy as decommissioning contractors to actually buy the plant from Dominion, that would have been another way to encourage competitive costs for and judicious use of the ratepayer funds that were contributed over many years into this decommissioning fund.
Yeah, but if you have it all in house, then you can essentially set the price, and you can make it so that $834,999,999 later, the decommissioning job is done.
You could add the 99 cents to.
If they really wanted to squeeze every last red cent out, they definitely could do that. So it was I guess not disturbing, but it was a disappointing outcome for us.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it was very frustrating last Wednesday. Whenever the commission met last week. They've been moving it back and forth between Thursday and Wednesday. Where the commission met last week, they approved the sale of the plant to Energy Solutions, so it'll go forth as proposed. And like I said, it's sort of wait and see, and I guess hope. Rub your lucky rabbit's foot or whatever it is to try to get some money out.
Yep. But in future shows we'll talk about getting the incentives structures in place, getting in the incentives creating a system with better incentives. And that's the whole discussion of performance-based rate making or performance-based regulation that's going on right now at the commission. So we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah, and I think maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll rope in Steve for that. I know he's got some thoughts on performance-based regulation.
Great. Yeah, we gotta get our team in here. So
cool.
On the tracks.
All right. So we're gonna hope for the best. I'm not optimistic, but we will hope for the best, and hopefully there's some money coming back to utility customers
eventually. And meanwhile, stay tuned and subscribe and like and do all that good stuff for us.
Yeah, like and subscribe. It does actually help us out on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, make certain that you're subscribed to that so that you can be notified as soon as we have new shows up. And admittedly, this format works much better in a podcast format than it does sort of on YouTube. But whatever works for you.
However you catch us, thanks for catching us.
All right, cool. All right. Otherwise, see you next time.
Until next time.
Thanks.